Kevin Solomon is a community organizer for Common Ground of Southeastern Wisconsin. Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing?
Good morning. I am good. I wish I could enter to win these
You
trivia
can,
myself.
Kevin, you can.
Just download the Civic Media app, Kevin. There's nothing stopping you.
We'll let you have a
I'm
break.
doing it right now.
Talk amongst yourselves, everybody. Kevin's entering.
Kevin, again, there was a big article in the Washington Post featuring you and your work trying to help out folks who live in this community housing facility called College Court Apartments. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, how you got involved in this and what is going on with these College Court Apartments in Milwaukee?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here. I am an organizer with Common Ground, which is an alliance of 45 institutions all over southeastern Wisconsin that come together to make a difference to have more economic and racial justice in our communities. About 2 years ago, we started meeting residents who live in public housing. There's 22 different properties. We've talked with over 1,900 residents, and College Court is one of those properties. We have seen just tremendous problems. Carmela Holloway at College Court has bed bugs in her ear. Carolyn Mullins at Lincoln Court in Bayview, she has mold and has a sinus infection from it because she has so many other antibiotics. She can't take antibiotics. She just has to live with the symptoms on the regular. People at South Lawn have rats crawling in their walls. I mean, it's just terrible conditions anywhere you go. And this is the second largest landlord in Milwaukee, the Housing Authority of the City of Milwaukee, HACM. It's a legally distinct landlord. It's not city, but we're failing 5,000 residents, mostly Black and brown, mostly low income, mostly disabled, and many of whom are veterans too.
And it's tragic, but unfortunately, those are the people who get skipped. In so many areas of our society, it is the elderly, the disabled, the brown and people of color, and I just the poor folks who live in these facilities are not getting any attention, and that's why you doing the work that you've done and this to appear in the Washington Post is finally shedding some light on it. But where do things stand right now, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's taken now 81 news articles locally and nationally to get some traction. I will say, I think one thing that's so important about this story is that it's not a story of desperation. It's not a story of those poor residents. The residents are fighting. This is a real partnership, common ground, and these residents sticking up, standing up to this Goliath of the housing authority. I think that's so inspiring. I think that's an important part of this story, that residents are courageous and fearless here. Um, where do things stand? Well, look, the housing authority is this kind of strange, legally gray entity. It's public, but it's not government. It has federal government money, but it's its own private landlord. It's its own distinct landlord. Um, here's where things stand. The mayor has power to appoint, nominate, that the Common Council approves members of the Board of Commissioners for the Housing Authority. So they're supposed to be governed by 7 members on the board. There's currently 4. One's term expired last November. Another has been unable to fulfill her duties for 3 months. So really, 2 to 3 people are overseeing this entity. So we put pressure on Mayor Johnson. It's time to nominate people for this board. He hasn't nominated anybody since August of 2022. He's friends with the executive director, Willie Hines, former president of the Common Council, powerful, powerful people in Milwaukee. He's backed him politically and publicly, even though Willie has come under intense scrutiny and there's been evidence of fraud, waste, and abuse. And so right now, where we're at is turning to Mayor Johnson to say, why are you backing this executive director who's failing, who's running the ship into the ground? Why aren't you putting people forth on this board for over 22 months? Why aren't you standing with residents, Mr. Mayor? That's really the concern here. So that's what we're focused on. We're talking with Congresswoman Gwen Moore about this. We're talking with the alders about this, but the buck stops with Mayor Johnson here.
Well, and it's got to be especially distressing for these residents who, as you pointed out, are predominantly people of color to see so little being done on their behalf by Milwaukee's first black mayor.
I think you capture it well. These residents are 87% black and brown, um, and they feel abandoned. They feel unheard. They've invited Mayor Johnson to come. College Court residents invited him to come tour their property on 35th and Highland. He declined. Uh, we want to work with Mayor Johnson. Common Ground, we've had a good relationship with him on issues on reckless driving. We won $6 million statewide together. We worked together on Vision Zero and implementing more traffic interventions. We've had a good relationship with him. We want to work with him on this, but you're right. It seems like these are the convenient people to skip, the people who don't vote as much, who don't make as much noise. It's
Who
been
don't
really
write
interesting.
checks.
Who don't write checks, who don't make donations. Absolutely.
I mean,
That's right.
let's be honest here. Kevin, I gotta ask, and kind of sitting back and just listening because I want to take it all in. And you say you have a relationship with the mayor, and that's wonderful on various projects. Do you get any sort of response at all? Or is it just, I mean, are you just being ignored on this topic from the office? Or are they giving you, oh, he'd love to, or we'd love to, or is it just like anything but this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and all your listeners know this playbook, right? The playbook is we take concerns very seriously. We're
Mhm.
looking into it. We have confidence things are improving. We meet regularly with Director Hines. Um, Lately, he's been saying on the board he can't find any good people because of all the negative press and Common Ground raising a ruckus. We've told him that's BS. Here are 7 people, talented experts who are willing to serve on this board. Um, I think this really boils down to power. Let's
Yep.
boil this down. This is power.
Mhm.
Residents in Common Ground have a certain amount of power, and Director Hines and his brother, who's a big, big, big church bishop in town, they have a lot of power. And so until Common Ground and residents have enough power to compel change here, nothing's going to be done. And the mayor's backing the bigger power here. He's backing the Hines and family entity.
You know, I gotta say, if you, I mean, I don't know the names on your list who are excellent suggestions for the board, but I can think of one person maybe. Anyone who lives in that building, put them on the board and let them tell their story and be the person of identification where you say they know what's going on and they can make the recommendations. But this is just ridiculous. This is shameful.
We're going to put a link to this Washington Post article in our show notes after we get the podcast up after the show, Kevin. It's really well done and very well researched, and some of the details in this and the way these people have to live is really shocking.
Yeah.
It's really shocking. And from what you're saying, it just sounds like this housing authority doesn't have it. No, there's nobody watching it. There's no oversight. There's no one who they're answerable to. It just sounds like this completely. Yeah,
I
we
mean,
kind of do what we want, and don't bug me.
Yeah, I mean, you both are just hitting the nail on the head. Greg, we've put up 3 residents out of those 7, 3 residents who would gladly serve on the board and share their
yeah.
story. To your point, hallelujah. And you're right too here, Jane. You know, this is so different. This is a lot like MPS, and it's different than MPS because MPS, the state came out with this huge report, whereas the federal government had been sitting on a report for a year and didn't come out publicly. MPS, Dr. Posley is well known in town, but Willie Hines is former president of the Common Council. This is like the person people thought was going to be mayor.
Yeah.
Um, and you're dealing with 70,000 kids versus 12,000 low income senior citizens, mostly black. I mean, the political situation is different, but look, we're going to keep pounding and pounding. This is getting worse and worse, and it's unfortunate. I'll just say this: it's unfortunate because our legacy in Milwaukee does not have to be public housing is blight and bane. It could be that public housing is beautiful and beloved, and we have an opportunity to turn it around right now.
Kevin, if you have time, we'd like to keep you for another segment if you can. Kevin Sullivan is here. He's a community organizer for Common Ground in Southeastern Wisconsin. Stay close. You're listening to Matt Mayer on air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning. Welcome back to Matt Nair on air. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, and Sweet Cal B coming to you live from our studio in downtown Waukesha. We're going to continue our conversation with Kevin Solomon. He is a community organizer with with Common Ground of Southeastern Wisconsin. And we're talking about this big article that came out in the Washington Post about what's going on with Milwaukee's public housing. And it's really a nightmare for the people who live there. But as you pointed out, Kevin, when we first started, the folks who live there aren't giving up. They're fighting back. They want to see that it's not like they don't like where they're living. They don't like the conditions where they're living. Is that accurate?
That's right. Really, it's if you talk with thousands of residents, you hear the same narrative all the time. It used to be so nice.
Yep.
I used to love this place, but it's gone downhill, and I want to move
Mhm.
now. I want out. That's the common narrative. But people want their buildings to be great. They want them, to be safe. Security is a big issue. Maintenance free, not having bed bugs and roaches and mold. They want to have their rent consistent, accurate, paid on time. They've been overcharged several late fees and thousands of dollars. Um, they just want basic, decent standards.
And was it over the last 20 years that they've really seen these, the downfall of these changes occurring? Is it more recent than that? Is it go back 30, 40 years?
That's a great question. What I hear from residents is that it's gone downhill in the last 5, 10 years. It's
Whoa.
true the pandemic made things worse. But you also hear that it's getting worse right now, that the last 2, 3 years have been terrible. And I'll just say to their credit, the Journal Sentinel has been asking this question and trying to get to the bottom of this. They've even asked Director Hines for interviews. He's declined to interview with them. They just sent him some questions about 2014, 2015, when he came on staff and some of the fraud that had been identified then under his leadership. And he declined to answer those questions. It does seem like it's a more recent thing, and it really does point back to him consistently.
Well, we're going to make a reach to Willie Hines, and we'll also make a reach to Mayor Cavalier Johnson from the city of Milwaukee to see if they will join us and talk about this. All we can do is ask.
Exactly. And Kevin, I mentioned this earlier. I used to work in local government, not in Milwaukee, but in Racine, and we dealt with various boards and local leaders and things like that. And it's infuriating to me to see the people that you're trying to help just getting glanced over and walked over and ignored. And when people ask the question, well, how can you let that happen? How can an article in the Washington Post come out about this? How can the mayor not be embarrassed? Well, when you are the mayor of a big city, or the size of the city that Milwaukee is, and you are surrounding yourself around the most powerful people who write those checks, who protect your fiefdoms, you don't have to care. That's something you don't have to do. And this is what's showing to me is that, and I hate to say this because I don't dislike the man, but in this instance, everything, Kevin, you're telling us is that this is just something he doesn't care about.
Well, and as you pointed out too, Kevin, I think because these are not big dollar donors and some of these people may not vote consistently because of whatever their circumstances are rather, it's like, well, we don't have to take care of them because however they feel isn't going to affect the outcome of our next election anyway.
It's appalling, it's disgusting, and it's disrespectful to residents. I mean, it took a front page Washington Post story on Memorial Day weekend to even get to this point, and still the mayor's not coming out as a champion on this.
Yep.
Um, it's notable to me that several elected leaders in Milwaukee asked for voting percentages by public housing residents. They requested that data. They wanted to see that data. It's also notable to me that residents, two things. One, have voted unanimously to begin working with Common Ground to form their own Public Housing Tenants Association, an independent organization of residents. We have some seed funding for that. We're working on hiring a lead organizer for that. And number two, that residents committed unanimously again to do a get out the vote campaign in all 12,000 units to talk to folks about issues in their buildings and talk about the importance of voting. I mean, residents are fired up about building power and having a long term seat at the table here.
Yeah. I mean, that was, in another I had many careers, Jane. I worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, and that was one thing we really worked hard on was getting into those housing, structures to talk to the people, to familiarize themselves with the voting process because some of them just don't care or are familiar, and really making them part of the process and own it because it's important. Their voice counts.
Kevin Solomon is our guest. He's a community organizer for Common Ground of Southeastern Wisconsin. And we're talking about community housing in Milwaukee and the massive problems that residents there are dealing with, finally getting some attention after some articles in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And as we also mentioned in the Washington Post, they've got to be just so. I mean, looking ahead to November, is there President Biden, Donald Trump? Does it matter to them? Because it doesn't seem like things are going to get better no matter who you vote for.
You know, Biden came to town. He spoke at a public housing building about investing in Sixth Street, and residents found that really disrespectful, frankly. Um, we had a meeting with the Biden campaign director for Wisconsin, told them about that sentiment. Residents directly to his face said that. Um, Told him about the Washington Post article, and now 3 weeks later, we've been asking for a meeting to talk, to have follow-ups, and we haven't heard anything. We're going to start reaching out to the head of the Wisconsin Democratic Party to ask for a meeting. But I think what the article shows you is that residents feel unheard by every elected official. It doesn't matter your party, it doesn't
Right.
matter your level. They feel
We don't
unheard,
matter.
period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't matter. We
And
don't matter to anybody.
and in an election, if someone primaries the current mayor, Mayor Cavalier Johnson, they can use this as a sticking point in the campaigning, fine, but no GOP, even though it's nonpartisan, is gonna, like, even they're not gonna care about the housing, so they get left behind by everybody in every sense of the word, and once again, as you put it, Kevin, shameful, disgusting, appalling. I mean, where are you, Milwaukee? Where are you for your people?
Is there anything that folks who are listening can do, Kevin?
I think, call and email Mayor Johnson and say, "Come on, change your tone here." That's a ripe and ready thing to do. I think it's worth noting there are some champions locally. President of the Common Council, Jose Perez, has been a huge advocate for residents. There are several alders who are now talking more and more about how to advocate. There are the local leaders.
Yeah.
Um, the mayor's not stepping up.
Well, again, we'll make a reach to Mayor Cavalier Johnson. We'll also reach out to Willie Hines and see if we can get them to join our show and talk about what's going on with this.
Yeah.
Good
Kevin
for you.
Sullivan has been our guest. He's a community organizer for Common Ground of Southeastern Wisconsin. Really, really appreciate your time, Kevin. Thank you so very much. Stay in touch with us and let us know what's going on as well.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for covering this topic. Appreciate your all's work.
Of
Absolutely.
course.
News is coming up next. By the way, text the word cabin, CABIN,
Cabin.
cabin, CABIN, via the Civic Media app to get into our Scotty Summer statewide text to win contest. You're listening to the Civic Media Radio Network. Stay close.